Chapter 64. Qin Tianming's brows furrowed like a river. He couldn't find any suspicious points. Moreover, according to Qin Wang's temperament, if he was present and offended him, he definitely wouldn't remain silent. But an unintentional sentence, a small matter, even if it offended Qin Wang, it wouldn't reach his ears. What was going on? Qin Tianming probably couldn't think of it even if he cracked his head. It was just because his youngest son kicked over the black peony in anger. The Luo family's daughter, Jingwan, was distressed for the flower, and Li Hongyuan was distressed for her. At that time, he couldn't show that he cared about her, so he could only find someone to settle the account behind her back. Qin Tianming's youngest son didn't have the qualifications to stand in front of Li Hongyuan, so he could only do it. In desperation, Qin Tianming gave his sons a confinement order. If they had official business, they were to return home immediately after finishing. If they had nothing to do, they weren't allowed to step out of the house half a step. From today onwards, the books that were thrown away were to be picked up again, and the martial arts that were abandoned were to be picked up again. Several Qin gongzi were stupefied by their father's move. Those who had official positions were fine, but those who didn't have official positions and loved to play, such as Qin Tianming's youngest son, were simply asking for their old lives. Just as they were about to habitually refute a few words, their father threw them a glare, and they obediently shut their mouths. When his mother was protecting him, he could still be unyielding, but his mother wasn't unprincipled in protecting him. When it came to serious matters, one wrong move, and she dealt with him more ruthlessly than his father. Qin Tianming suspected that this matter was likely caused by this youngest son. Usually, he was the one who could cause trouble the most, so he didn't have a good expression. Compared to other people, he was more cautious and warned that if he dared to sneak away, he would directly break his legs. However, it was Qin Tianming's simple and crude approach that made his branch more prosperous, and also allowed his youngest son to avoid the retaliatory blow caused by the fire in the flower market. Qin Tianming could only temporarily solve the matter like this, but he still didn't know if that master would be satisfied. The person Qin Tianming was thinking about someone else at this moment. It must be said that this ferocious beast was not a vegetarian to begin with. It had always restrained itself from eating meat. However, today, it suddenly licked 2 mouthfuls of fragrant, fatty meat. It was the piece of meat that it had been longing for a long time. It was only because of many restrictions that it could not swallow it whole that it restrained itself. Perhaps it was because of the environment, but at that time, giving up on the fatty meat in its mouth was not something unbearable. However, now that it was late at night, it could not help but recall the taste. It seemed to be incomparably delicious, yet it also felt like it had not tasted anything. The more it was like this, the more unbearable it became, and the more restless the evil fire in its body became. When he bathed, he directly soaked in cold water. Eunuch Mu trembled with fear when he saw this. It was still a little cold at night. What if the cold air entered his body? In fact, what Eunuch Mu was more puzzled was why his master had wronged himself like this. He was clearly a prince, and had a reputation of being dissolute. Even if he changed his bed every night, no one could say anything about it. In fact, as far as he knew, his master really did not have a single woman. Sometimes, he even suspected that his master had a hidden disease. However, as a close attendant, he was very clear about his master's physical condition. It could not be better. After eliminating all the possibilities, the only reason left was the most unlikely one: his master was keeping his chastity for Miss Luo. What was the reason that could make such a proud and honorable person like his master do this, and it was under the circumstances that the other party was completely unaware of it. They knew that his master had a secret because he had not concealed it and did not care about letting them know. As for what the secret was, they had no way to find out, and they did not dare to find out. Li Hongyuan soaked in the cold water for 2 hours, but it seemed that there was no effect. Eunuch Mu was called in by Li Hongyuan. He originally thought that he was going to wait on him to sleep. Unexpectedly, Li Hongyuan had already put on his clothes. He was wearing a black brocade robe, a belt around his waist, and a pair of brocade shoes of the same color. In addition, he had no other accessories. But his hair was still wet and hanging down, which did not cover his coldness. On the contrary, for some reason, he made people more and more afraid to approach him. Eunuch Mu had to go forward to dry Li Hongyuan's hair. It took him some time, and then he automatically tied up his hair. He had made a mistake once, and he could not make the same mistake again. It was not the first time for him to go out at night. But Eunuch Mu had a feeling that the purpose of tonight was different from before. The secret guards who followed Li Hongyuan thought that he had something important to do. When they arrived outside the courtyard wall of the Luo family, they thought of a certain possibility and could not believe it. However, when they saw their master jump over the wall and enter, these well-trained secret guards could not help but be stunned. Fortunately, the stiff expression did not last for too long. Thinking of the fact that their master kidnapped people during the day, it seemed that it was not surprising that he would do something like sneaking into a lady's room at night. What did the secret guards do? When their master planned, they took action first. When their master had an accident, they risked their lives to save him. When their master killed someone, they dealt with the aftermath. Now that their master wanted to sneak into a lady's room, they naturally had to keep watch. They looked at each other. Those who should be outside stayed outside, and those who should go in went in. They had a tacit understanding of the division of labor and did not need to communicate with each other. Although Li Hongyuan had never been to the Luo family, he was very familiar with the layout of the Luo family. He did not need to take a detour. He avoided the guards on night patrol and went directly to Begonia Elegant House. At this time, Begonia Elegant House was naturally sleeping in the dark like other places. Hearing the familiar signal, Mama Gong was immediately alerted. She nimbly got up, but did not make any sound. She listened carefully. The sound was very soft and did not disturb others. Mama Gong held a slightly bright lamp and walked into the courtyard. She saw the figure standing proudly. It was obviously a man, and it was very obvious that he was not one of the secret guards. Mama Gong immediately realized who it was. Mama Gong hated that she could not fiercely bite him. Mama Gong stepped forward. With the help of the dim light, she finally saw the other party's face. It was indeed the living king of hell who meant what he said. Greetings to your highness. Your highness came in the middle of the night. It is really improper and has broken the rules. It also degrades your highness's prestige and loses your bearing and self-restraint. The secret guards who followed behind her almost broke out in cold sweat. They didn't know that the Lady Protector was capable in all aspects. These two were not ordinary. While they were sweating for her, they also faintly admired her in their hearts. This prince thought that Mama Gong should have known that these things are nothing to this prince. If this prince wants to see Wan Wan, you can't stop me. I don't think this prince needs to teach you what to do. Mama Gong suppressed the anger in her heart. There was a hungry wolf coveting her miss, but she had to be an accomplice. If she let the other secret guards do it, a group of rough men would cause her miss's servant girls to suffer. Therefore, she could only use a gentle method to let those servant girls have a good night's sleep. Your Highness, please wait a moment. Li Hongyuan stood in the courtyard. When he saw the dim light in Jingwan's room, he walked straight in. Because of the injury on her foot, Jingwan was determined not to let her keep watch at night. Moreover, Jingwan did not like to let others keep watch at night. Therefore, the two senior servant girls were the ones who were guarding outside tonight. However, Mama Gong had already moved them to another place. Mama Gong waited in the room without any intention of leaving. Li Hongyuan completely ignored her and casually threw an item to her. Mama Gong subconsciously caught it and opened the cloth wrapped around it. When she saw the item inside, she really did not know what expression she should have. He used a precious treasure like the night luminescent pearl to spy on a beauty at night. Li Hongyuan walked to Jingwan's bedside and lifted the muslin curtain. When he saw Jingwan's peaceful and beautiful sleeping face, his restless heart suddenly calmed down. In his previous life, he had not seen her sleeping face many times. However, every time he saw her sleeping face, her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was in a nightmare and could not escape. Li Hongyuan reached out and gently brushed his fingers across her brows. They were smooth and delicate. Following the corner of her eyes, his fingers sank into her hair. Her well-maintained black hair made it hard for him to part with it. Mama Gong put the night luminescent pearl into a hollow incense ball and hung it at the head of the bed. Immediately, the inside of the curtain could be seen clearly. Jingwan's originally excellent skin was now glowing like a pearl. Compared to his previous life, this was the first and only time he hugged her. Although his body was originally good, he had experienced all kinds of hardships and had become rough. However, it was this kind of her that made him intoxicated. It made him shameless and unscrupulous. In this life, he must protect her well. Chapter 65. Your Highness. Even though Mama Gong lowered her voice, there was still a hint of sternness in her voice. Li Hongyuan turned his head and glanced at her indifferently. That glance made Mama Gong's heart jump to her throat, blocking all the words she had yet to say. Nanny Gong frowned. The possessiveness in her eyes was dense to the point it couldn't be dispersed, and she seemed like a wild beast that occupied its territory. Whoever dared obstruct her or tried to seize her prey would immediately pounce out and tear that person into pieces. Either get out, or shut up for this prince. Mama Gong's face was stiff. After a few breaths, she opened her mouth and said, Your Highness really cares for Mississippi. No matter what you do, please think for Mississippi. Then she crouched down and left. No matter whether she was happy or angry, she never forgot the rules and etiquette. She had always been strict with herself, but tolerant of others. She was meticulous with Jingwan. Although Jingwan's servant girls revered her, they mostly treated her like family. Sometimes she was the best teaching. During the day, she had reminded Li Hongyuan once. This was the second time, and it would also be the last time. Li Hongyuan, the former master, had a bad temper and often did unimaginable things. Moreover, he always did whatever he wanted. If it was something else or someone else, it was impossible to expect him to restrain himself. However, this person was her young lady. Nanny Gong had a deep trust in him. Based on how much he cared for her, he really held her in the palm of his hand and placed her at the top of his heart. Sometimes, she even felt that if he had to choose between the river and the young lady, he would choose the young lady. That kind of love was not fake. After all, the young lady herself did not know. Naturally, it was impossible for her to show it to people like them. If he could do this, how could he do something bad to Miss at this critical moment? If he really couldn't control himself and took Miss's body, he would definitely think of a way to deal with the aftermath and not let Miss's reputation be tarnished. Now that Granny Gong had thought this through, she decided not to continue to stand there and cause trouble. Li Hongyuan really didn't care whether Granny Gong went out or not. She slowly took off her shoes and socks, then her outer robe, and then her inner garment. The whole process was quite pleasing to the eyes. Finally, she took off her crown, and her hair that didn't belong to Jingwan fell down. It must be said that Nanny Gong had also used something on Jingwan. Otherwise, she couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't pounce on him in this situation. After all, he was a handsome man with an amazing body. In the middle of the night, a man and a woman alone in a place where one's imagination would run wild, doing something so seductive. Most importantly, his deep eyes were filled with only her. How many people could resist him? Jingwan felt that she would most likely become a layman at that moment. Unfortunately, Jingwan was in a deep sleep. Because she was drugged with something to calm her nerves, she didn't even dream. Naturally, she was unaware of the outside world. Li Hongyuan placed his hand on the neckline of his underwear. After hesitating for a moment, he slowly tore off his underwear as well. His slender and powerful body and wheat-colored skin, even though he was a grown man, due to his pampered upbringing and proper maintenance, he looked just as delicate. Li Hongyuan lifted the brocade quilt and was about to slide in, but his body couldn't help but stiffen. The situation under the quilt was very different from what he had imagined. It looked like she was sleeping properly, but what was underneath was not proper at all. Because Mama Gong practiced martial arts, her hearing was far better than ordinary people. When she heard the faint sounds outside, she suddenly thought of her Mrs. Bad habit that couldn't be corrected. She was originally a hungry wolf. If she continued like this, she really couldn't stay calm. Jingwan, who was originally unaware of the outside world, opened her eyes in a daze. Coincidentally, her eyes met with Li Hongyuan's. Perhaps Li Hongyuan didn't expect Jingwan to wake up. He was stunned for a moment and didn't know how to react. However, Jingwan rubbed against his body because of her discomfort. This reaction made Li Hongyuan instantly understand that Jingwan wasn't really awake. Otherwise, a girl in the boudoir wouldn't be like this when she suddenly encountered something like this. Li Hongyuan sighed in relief and at the same time felt a little regretful. He was prepared to be discovered by Jingwan. However, some things weren't easy to explain. He still hoped that after the two of them got married, they would have some time together. Then, even if some of the things he did were a little out of line, he could confidently say that he fell in love with her at first sight. However, he, Li Hongyuan, wasn't a saint. He helped her do everything behind her back, but she didn't know anything about it. He was still a little unhappy. Jingwan's eyes were covered with a layer of mist. The corners of her eyes were dyed with an abnormal shade of red. Since she was awake, Li Hongyuan just assumed that the two of them were in love with each other. That exceptionally pleasant voice kept calling out, "Wan Wan," by her ear. Li Hongyuan had experienced the ups and downs of his previous life. He had tasted all kinds of joys and sorrows. He had stepped through wind, frost, rain, and snow. Countless people wouldn't be able to experience the ups and downs of life. Therefore, his rationality was absolutely beyond anyone's imagination. Even if he was sinking, he knew that now wasn't the time. Therefore, he didn't completely indulge himself. Mama Gong waited outside for 2 hours before she heard the living king of hell calling for her to come in. Even though she was mentally prepared, Mama Gong still quickly walked in after hearing the call. She lost her usual calmness. Li Hongyuan was loosely draped in a robe. He wrapped Jingwan in a quilt and held her in his arms as he sat on a soft couch. His hair was loose and his eyes were half closed. There was a hint of laziness in his expression. The usual hostility and gloominess were all gone. His entire person had softened, and because of this, he appeared even more attractive. Even Mama Gong couldn't help but be startled when she saw him. In just a short moment, Mama Gong looked at Jingwan's peaceful sleeping face and quickly walked to the bedside. She lifted the gauze curtain and looked at the messy bed. Her heart was filled with panic. Fortunately, there were no traces of blood. Mama Gong deftly changed the things on the bed. She turned around to look at Li Hongyuan. "Your Highness, this servant asked your people to go back and get some clothes for you. I'll also pour some water for you to wash up in the washroom." Li Hongyuan opened his eyes and glanced at her. He got up with Jingwan in his arms and put her on the bed. Mama Gong mixed some warm water for him and put it in the washroom. Then she went back to wash Jingwan. In order not to disturb others, she naturally couldn't take a bath in a big way. Mama Gong lifted the quilt and saw that Jingwan didn't have any marks on her body. She didn't know whether she should admire his endurance or doubt his love for this girl. It was said that it was difficult to control oneself when one was deeply in love. Even if he was a man with an unmentionable disease, it wouldn't prevent him from leaving some marks. However, it was obvious that Nanny Gong's idea was premature. When she turned Jingwan over and wiped her back, Nanny Gong was so angry that she almost fainted when she saw the dense marks on her back. Her skin color was not normal at all. Some of the marks even had small red dots the size of a needle tip. If she didn't apply medicine, Jingwan would definitely notice it when she woke up tomorrow morning. This made Mama Gong almost unable to restrain herself and do something that offends her superiors. When Li Hongyuan came out of the washroom, Mama Gong was concentrating on applying medicine for Jingwan. She was angry and naturally didn't give him a good face. However, although Li Hongyuan only tasted a bit of meat, it was still far from being full. Right now, he was in a good mood and didn't bother to argue. She tidied up Jingwan, including her hair. The most important thing was that she put on her underwear. Seeing that Li Hongyuan wouldn't leave at this time, Mama Gong packed up her things and went out. Out of sight, out of mind. Li Hongyuan supported his head with one hand, lying on his side and looking at Jingwan. His fingers twirled a strand of her hair around his finger and played with it. Ben Wang originally didn't intend to do anything. It was you, Wan, who seduced Ben Wang first. Therefore, you can't blame Ben Wang for not doing the same. If Jingwan heard his words, she would probably be irritable. Jin Qin Wang, where's your face? Chapter 66. Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan for a moment before getting up. Gong Momo knew that unless it was necessary, he did not like people to get close to him, so she did not step forward to help him change his clothes. However, he was able to hug the girl all night. From this point, it could be seen that he treated the girl differently. Li Hongyuan quickly put on his clothes, freshened up, and sat back on the bed. He fixed his gaze on Jingwan and finally leaned over to kiss her lips. Take good care of her. Only then did he leave. The shadow guards who had been standing guard outside did not dare to have the slightest complaint. Moreover, when they found that their master did not have such a heavy air of hostility, they could not help but be secretly happy. Once again, they hoped that the future Wang Fei would be able to pass through the door earlier. Taking advantage of the night, how he came, how he went back, except for a few people, even the person involved, Jingwan, did not know that the dignified Jin Qin Wang had visited the Luo Fu at night. This visit lasted for nearly 3 shichin. Li Hongyuan, on the other hand, felt refreshed. Jingwan, on the other hand, was not in a good state. After waking up, she seemed to be in a daze. She did not get up as usual. Instead, she sat on the bed as if she had nothing to live for. She had been dreaming all night, and it was the kind of dream that she did not have during the most restless period of her previous life. She somewhat irritably pulled at her hair. In the end, what was going on? It was said that what one thinks during the day, one dreams at night, but she absolutely did not have the slightest bit of such thoughts. Then, she belatedly realized that she was wearing clothes and that the things on the bed had been changed. Especially when Gong Momo just happened to walk to the bedside. "Miss, do you want to get up?" Jingwan could not help but imagine. How big of a commotion did she make last night that even the people who were standing guard outside found out? She did not have the face to see people, okay? Mama. Jingwan moved her mouth, but the rest of the words could not come out. Gong Momo was not old, but she was shrewd. How could she not know Jingwan's thoughts? It seems that Miss had a nightmare last night. Nubi just happened to come in and saw that Miss was sweating, so Nubi wiped Miss and changed the mattress. Jingwan heard this and breathed a sigh of relief. However, she felt that Gong Momo said this to protect her face. She was also very glad that it was not the Yahuan who found out. As for why Gong Momo came in at night, it was not the least bit strange. She almost did not get up at night, and would not ask for water, but Gong Momo treated her like a child, for fear that she would lift the quilt and catch a cold. She did not seem to feel at ease if she did not check to check. Gong Momo, Gong Momo, Momo, Gong, Gong Momo. Gong Momo had expected this, so the hot water was quickly carried into the bathroom. Jingwan was sure again that she made a big commotion last night. In fact, Jingwan was not sure whether the Yahuan knew it or not. For the first time, she was like an ostrich, so she did not ask them to serve her and continued to bother Gong Momo. This was exactly what Gong Momo wanted. After all, if the Yahuan saw the marks on her back, they would be shocked. Even if she could find a way to cover it up, it would be very troublesome. Jingwan nestled comfortably in the water and gradually forgot the awkwardness from before. In fact, she still had a question in her mind. Why didn't she feel anything when Gong Momo wiped her body and dressed her? Why did she sleep so soundly? Well, it was very embarrassing. And according to the conservative thinking of everyone, even if it was Gong Momo, Jingwan really could not ask. So, she could only stop here and erase it from her mind as soon as possible. Even if it felt very real, especially that pair of eyes that almost drowned her, and that deep and sexy voice, according to the saying in her previous life, her ears were about to get pregnant. However, Jingwan treated it purely as a dream. She was very open-minded and did not hesitate to forget about it. But Gong Momo, who looked at her back, did not know how angry she was. And according to her understanding of the living hell, if there was a first time, there would be a second time. Maybe in the future, he would often do such a night attack. She could only cover for him and not let others know that the girl she pampered in the palm of her hand was not protected well, but was sent to the mouth of a hungry wolf as an accomplice. The more she thought about it, the more depressed she felt. She did not pay attention and hit her a little harder. Jingwan hissed and gasped twice. In fact, it was not too painful. It was just that it came suddenly, so she was particularly sensitive. But the skin was so tender that it hurt when a soft towel rubbed it with a little force. Was it really going to be made of tofu? Gong Momo hurriedly softened her strength. Miss, is it painful? It's okay. I don't know why, but I feel strange. It's my fault. I was distracted and hit you a little harder. If she could see her back, she would not feel strange. After bathing, she took care of her body as usual and applied some medicine. The pain was gone, but the marks would not disappear in a short time. Jingwan cleaned up and began to do morning exercises. Even if she was sweating and had to take a bath again, it did not matter. As a girl of the noble family, she was so capricious. After more than half an hour of morning exercises and bathing, Jingwan regained her vitality. As usual, she ate a bowl of nourishing porridge. When she went to pay respects to her mother, she met her father. It seemed that he was not in good spirits because of a hangover. Later, concubine Ji, concubine Ping, and the two Shu sisters came one after another. Needless to say, the elder brother was not young, so he did not have to pay respects every day. Where is Madame Bai? Luo Rongyan did not see her, so he asked casually. In his opinion, even if she was pregnant, she still had to do what she should do. It was just paying respects, and it was not a long journey. How could she be tired? Jingwan glanced at her father. He still did not know about Madame Bai. Therefore, Jingwan respected her father more than enough, but was not close enough. From her own point of view, she naturally hoped that he would not put the concubines in his eyes. However, from the concubine's point of view, he was a complete scum. Moreover, he was not a competent father. She gently pinched Madame Zhang, who was about to speak. If she let her mother say it, she did not know what she would say. Moreover, there were 2 younger sisters present. How could she say those dirty things so casually? Father, your face does not look good. How about I take my 2 younger sisters to pay respects to grandmother first? You can go later. Luo Rongyan was not stupid. He knew that there was something going on. He nodded and said, okay, you go first. Jingwan led Luo Jingyu and Luo Jingwei away. Before leaving, she glanced at Concubine Ji. Concubine Ji nodded imperceptibly, indicating that she understood Jingwan's meaning. Rather than letting Madame Zhang say this, it was better to let Concubine Ji say it. As the saying goes, one must pay attention to the art of speaking. The same matter, different words could lead to different results. Concubine Ji was very clear about her position. Therefore, Jingwan believed that she would say this matter perfectly. If Madame Bai knew her place, Jingwan naturally would not do anything to her. However, as Lu said, she relied on the piece of meat in her belly to abuse her power. Now that something had happened, she could not blame Jingwan for adding insult to injury. In the eyes of Concubine Ji and the others, Jingwan was too soft-hearted. If it were up to them, it would be best to directly cause an accident and let her die suddenly. Just confining her was too easy on her. Compared to Falling Plum House, the main courtyard was more lively. As soon as Jingwan and her sisters arrived, the people from the 3rd branch also arrived. However, compared to before, there was an additional woman. Even if Jingwan did not have any impression of the concubines from the 3rd branch, she immediately understood that this woman was the one that her 3rd uncle had brought back last night. She really did look like a beauty that would make anyone feel pity for her. Logically speaking, ordinary concubines did not have the qualifications to greet old Madame, especially someone like old Madame Luo, who did not like concubines. Madame Lu was not a fool. Even if she pretended to be virtuous and magnanimous, she would not do such a stupid thing. Then, there was only one reason. Luo Rongping had her bring a concubine who had been exposed to old Madame Luo. Naturally, she was much better than those concubines who had silently died in the back courtyard and no one would know. It was clear that this woman had a high position in Luo Rongping's heart. Mother, this is the little sister that 3rd master brought back last night. He treats her like his own flesh and blood. Didn't this daughter-in-law bring her here early in the morning for you to see? Madame Lu said with a smile. However, everyone could see that her smile was forced and her words were filled with grievances. Jingwan sighed in her heart. Her acting skills were amazing. Jingwan would believe that she was burning with anger because Luo Rongping had humiliated her, but she would not believe that she would compromise. Her purpose was nothing more than to gain sympathy in front of old Madame Luo. As long as old Madame Luo stood on her side and supported her, then no matter how much Luo Rongping doted on this woman, she would not be able to cause any trouble. This little sister is not only beautiful, but her name is also good. She is called. Chapter 67. As a concubine, without the permission of the mistress, she dared to speak casually, let alone interrupt her. Mrs. Luke should have reprimanded her for being so unruly, but she didn't. Instead, she showed a look of fear. Nyang, after all, my younger sister just got married. She doesn't understand many rules. Please forgive her. If these words were said by Madame Zhang, other people would only think that she was hopeless. But since it was Madame Lu, the way everyone looked at her was a bit strange. Was it because she felt threatened, or Jingwan's attention was not on Mrs. Lu? In her opinion, no matter what Mrs. Lu's reaction was, it was normal. But this woman who called herself Huan Yang, looking at her posture, she was not a person who didn't understand etiquette. But she did such a rude thing. It could only be said that what Mrs. Lu wanted to say might be more unfavorable to her. As the saying goes, choose the lesser of two evils. However, Mrs. Lu only wanted to say her name. The harm caused by a name was nothing more than offending and taboo. Jingwan's first thought was that her name might offend her grandmother. As for the name Huan Yang, it was most likely changed for some reason after Mrs. Lu saw her last night. And Mrs. Lu didn't say Huan Yang's original name. Her purpose was to create trouble for Huan Yang. Since it had nothing to do with her, Jingwan looked away after a few glances. She glanced at Luo Jingying, who looked a little dispirited, and Luo Jingqiang, who was much more beautiful than usual. Luo Jingying was probably scolded harshly, while Luo Jingqiang was about to break free. She didn't want to continue living in Luo Jingying's shadow and was gradually blooming her own brilliance. Jingwan didn't know that after she looked away, Huan Yang was quietly sizing her up. Among the younger generation, old madam doted on her the most. That kind of bearing and self-restraint, as well as the indifference from inside out, could only be cultivated by being carefree and following one's heart. It was really enviable. However, if she wanted to establish a foothold in this backyard, it was true that she couldn't offend her. However, it was not a bad method to occasionally use her hand to restrain Lu Shi. After all, people with discerning eyes could see that old madam didn't like Lu Shi. If she used her hand to plot against Lu Shi, no matter what the result was, Lu Shi would suffer. However, she must be careful when doing things. If people knew that she was the one behind it, her end would be much worse than Mrs. Lu's. Jingwan didn't know that in this short period of time, someone had ideas about her. But even if she knew, it didn't matter. She would deal with whatever came her way. Even if those powerful people were given some time to plan carefully, even if she couldn't trample them into the mud, she could make them fall. And it would be easier to deal with the ghosts in this house. You are the third branch. As the mistress, you should take care of yourself. You don't need me to forgive you. Nyang is right. Mrs. Lu felt wronged. She looked at Madame Luo's eyes as if she was bullied by a concubine. Not only did she not get her mother-in-law's help, but her mother-in-law also bullied her. Even Jingwan was a little shocked by her mother's pitiful appearance. As the Lu matriarch's daughter, Luo Jingying was shocked speechless by her mother's appearance, not to mention the others. This style changed too quickly and too strangely. If Mrs. Lu hadn't been in front of everyone's eyes, they would have thought that she was a different person. However, looking at Madame Luo's originally indifferent face, it gradually sank and had a tendency to become colder and colder. The others were affected and became more and more quiet. Only Mrs. Lu was still the same. Just when Jingwan suspected that Mrs. Lu had also been seen through, she found a contradiction. Mrs. Lu's mood did not change with her grandmother's mood. This was not the performance of a bully. Even if her grandmother didn't like her, she didn't pull down her face like now. So, Mrs. Lu had really angered her grandmother. Jingwan looked carefully and thought carefully again. She understood that Mrs. Lu had not been seen through. She was still the same person, scheming and scheming. This time, she was angered by Luo Rongping. She was ready to tear off her hypocritical mask and do something desperate. Madame Lu's appearance was actually a threat. If Madame Luo didn't stand on her side, then soon, the people outside would know that she was a punching bag. She was determined to drag the reputation of the Luo family down with her. Madame Luo sneered, "Mrs. Lu, I really misjudged you before." Although Madame Luo was usually kind, after all, she had accumulated power for decades. When her aura was released, Mrs. Lu would definitely not be able to withstand it. Her face could not help but turn pale. Nyang, your daughter-in-law has no choice. In fact, what Madame Luo really cared about was not that Mrs. Lu was unscrupulous, but that she was selfish. For her own interests and face, she could completely abandon her children that she always talked about. If it was really for the good of the two children, why couldn't she endure it? After all, she was the mistress of the house. Even if Lady Huan had the upper hand, public opinion and etiquette would be on her side. As long as she endured it until her daughter got married and her son became an adult, she could let go of all the torment and revenge. But she just couldn't bear the slightest grievance. She didn't want to wait, and she didn't want to endure it. It was pure nonsense to say that she had always been compromising in the Luo family. It was fine if she was domineering in the third branch, but Madame Luo didn't suppress her, let alone torture her, and her sisters-in-law didn't make things difficult for her. It was she who wanted to pretend to be virtuous and magnanimous. Who could she blame? With Madame Luo's temper, even if her daughter-in-law had no children, she would not put people around her son. If you were really jealous and made a big scene, she might even help you stop those concubines from entering the house. If you were willing to pretend, who would take the initiative to speak up? It's not like you have nothing better to do. Speaking of which, she could keep pretending because her bottom line was not stepped on. But when her bottom line was stepped on, she was like a cat whose tail was stepped on. All the hair on her body stood up and she jumped up high. Lady Lu didn't care about her children, but Madame Luo couldn't not care about the reputation of the Luo family. If it was really spread that she mistreated her son's daughter-in-law, being gossiped about was not a small matter. She was afraid that she would be caught and accused of not being strict with the family. If Luo Shangshu's political enemies also accused him of, "How can you sweep the world if you don't sweep the house?" his official position might be taken away. Madame Luo's eyes fell on Lady Huan. Go back and copy the female commandments 300 times, and then learn to be a concubine. I'm not feeling well, so I don't have to come to pay my respects in the future. It's so noisy that I have a headache. Lady Huan didn't complain or get angry. She was obedient. Many people sighed in their hearts. Sure enough, this person was not easy to deal with. She could force Lady Lu to use extreme methods to find Madame Luo to be her backer. Was this something that an ordinary person could do? Lady Lu was satisfied. Her disgusting image disappeared. This daughter-in-law will go back and talk to her. In the future, she will not disturb you. Madame Luo was the villain. Even if Luo Romping knew about it, at most, he would say a few words to Lady Lu. The punishment of his beloved would still be carried out, unless he dared to disobey Madame Luo. Madame Luo was not happy, so naturally, Jingwan was not happy. Originally, she wanted to watch the third branch's drama and add more firewood when needed, but now she changed her mind. Luo Jingying often targeted her, but she didn't care. But if he stretched his claws to the head of the person she cared about, then don't blame her for cutting off his claws. Dismissed. Those who didn't come don't need to come. After Madame Luo finished speaking, she directly got up and went to the back. Jingwan let her two younger sisters go back by themselves. She went to see Madame Luo. Jingwan was worried that something bad would happen to her because of anger. Madame Luo's sullen mood lasted for a while, so she talked to Jingwan about her marriage. Later, I will have someone send a message to your eldest grandaunt and let her send a message to your third granduncle. I believe that it will be settled in a month or two at most. At that time, the spring examination will be over, and Min Gear can have a double happiness. Grandmother, are you asking me to add happiness to cousin Min? Jingwan said with a smile. Of course, a married daughter is like spilled water. Madame Luo pretended to be serious and said. Grandmother, granddaughter is sad. Jingwan cooperated and showed a pitiful look. The grandmother and granddaughter laughed together. The servants around Madame Luo all breathed a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, before Madame Luo's message could be sent to the Qin family, news came from the other side, saying that their third brother, Qin Jingmin's grandfather, had brought his family to the capital again. When the letter was sent from their side, they also set off. Calculating the time, at most 10 days to half a month, the family would arrive in the capital. Madame Luo was very happy. Not only could she see her brother, whom she hadn't seen for many years, but she could also settle Wan's marriage as soon as possible. It was no wonder that Madame Luo was so anxious. Because when it came to Jingwan's marriage, she always felt unsure. If it was not confirmed, her heart would always be in suspense. Although this feeling was strange, Madame Luo had to treat it seriously. Chapter 68. Even if more than one life had been lost in the inner residence, in the eyes of those big men, it was just a small matter. If it touched on something that he cared about, he might intervene, and his methods were usually simple and crude. If he was under certain restrictions, he might even tell the truth. If he was the absolute authority in the family, then he would help whoever he favored without any principles. Even if the others were to stomp their feet in anger, they could only swallow their anger. In their eyes, the only important thing was the imperial court. Except for those who really cared about the people in the world, the rest didn't even care about their own jobs. They worked hard to curry favor with this and that, seeking for benefits for themselves and their families. They tried to climb higher and obtain supreme power. They didn't have the ability to expand the territory and seek for the title of Marquis, so they hoped to rise to a higher level by succeeding the emperor. The important thing in the imperial court today was the fire in the flower market yesterday. Because the fire was not put out in time, the whole flower market was almost destroyed and there were heavy casualties. If it was an accident, the most unlucky was probably the hidden fire army and the city defense team. But it was obvious that this was an arson case. Because there were too many corpses in the fire and it was a serious matter, after the fire was put out, the matter of apprehending the murderer was handed over to the governor, Left Fengyi, and Right Fufeng of the capital government. In less than 24 hours, even though the three of them led all the officials of the capital government day and night, they still didn't have a clue at the imperial court meeting. They didn't even know the identity of the dead. The governor's eyes were bloodshot. He knelt in the main hall and was scolded by Emperor Lu Qingdi. The governor was also helpless. The corpses were so badly burned that even the coroner couldn't see much. He didn't know whether they were burned to death or thrown into the fire after death. There were no other clues at the scene. It seemed that someone had erased the corpses. Everything pointed to the fact that someone had done it, but there was no evidence. The more it was like this, the more complicated the matter became. However, in fact, many people in the main hall actually knew the truth of the matter, but because there was no evidence, they all kept their mouths shut. Perhaps in their hearts, they had already cursed the other party's ancestors hundreds of times. That's right, the third prince, Prince Rui, believed it was the first prince, Prince Kong, and Prince Kong believed it was Prince Rui, and as a pawn, the pitiful worm, the fourth prince, Prince Gong, also believed it was one of these two, or maybe they were temporarily working together to trick him. In his heart he couldn't wait to skin these two people alive. The forces in his hands were relatively weak, this time the loss, for him, was not small. In addition to these three people, the second prince died early, the fifth prince was sick and almost didn't go out. The sixth prince Li Hongyuan was a master who didn't care about anything. Out of 10 morning court sessions, it was already good if he could attend 1 or 2 times. Now he wasn't here. The other princes who had reached the age of 16 stood in their respective positions. Whether they were secretly relying on a powerful brother, or had their own ambitions, whether they knew the inside story of this matter or not, they didn't intend to get involved. After all, if they were careless, they could get into trouble. Being pushed out as a scapegoat was light, but losing their little lives was not worth it. The people of each faction naturally weren't idle. Even if they had nothing to do with this matter, they would fabricate it. Otherwise, even if it was a trivial matter, they would use it to attack each other, digging holes for each other. If they weren't loyal to the same master on the surface and in the dark, they would do their best to make enemies. After all, the ones who suffered were only the masters on the surface. Because there were few wars, the military officials were weaker than the civil officials. However, they were a group of rough old men. Among them, Qin Tianming was the first to stand out. If there was a disagreement, he would directly use his fists. Even if he was once beaten by Luqingde, he didn't repent. Luqingde was annoyed by the quarrel. He didn't handle the business properly, and the more he talked, the more he deviated. Enough. The court, which was originally like a market, quieted down in an instant. The Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, together with the capital magistrate, investigate this matter together. The time limit is 3 days. If you can't give me a satisfactory result, all related personnel will be fined 3 years of salary. If there is anyone who slacks off or doesn't do his best, he will be demoted by 1 rank and go back to reflect on his mistakes for 3 months. The court session is dismissed. Luqingde said with a cold face and directly left. Farewell, Your Majesty. Those who didn't care about the matter cupped their hands to their colleagues and leisurely left Fengtian Hall. The Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the capital magistrate had a headache. What was this all about? The most innocent was Diwu Taiqing. As the Chancellor of the Supreme Court, he happened to be at the scene yesterday. Coincidentally, he was also neutral. No matter who the master behind the Minister of Justice and the capital magistrate were, he felt no pressure to find him. In a word, Lord Diwu, even if you didn't say anything at the scene, your investigation ability is also first class. Capable people do more work. If you need anything, just say the word. Not to mention the capital magistrate, who was a 4th rank official, was originally lower than the Chancellor of the Supreme Court. There was nothing wrong with his flattery. However, as the Minister of Justice, you have the nerve to say such things. Diwu Taiqing looked at him coldly. Unfortunately, the other party was extremely thick-skinned and didn't feel ashamed at all. His whole face was written with, "Thank you for your trouble." Diwu Taiqing snorted coldly. It was true that he was a hard nut to crack, but he wasn't the kind of person who liked to take on everything. He knew that if this matter wasn't handled well, it wouldn't be as simple as losing his salary or being demoted. If the princes were really fighting behind his back, he might lose his life. Who would be so stupid as to take on this matter alone? Let's do our own things today. We'll gather tomorrow. It's best if it's handled well, but if it's not, we'll continue to investigate. If it's fine, everyone's fine. If there's a problem, we'll shoulder it together. Bypassing the two, he quickly caught up with Luo Peishan. Although Luo Peishan was only in the Ministry of Rights, Diwu Taiqing never underestimated his ability. He was also at the scene yesterday. If he asked him, he might be able to get more pertinent advice. When the two came to a place, Luo Peishan knew what Diwu Taiqing wanted to do. He waved his hand and stopped Diwu Taiqing from saying anything. He only said to Diwu Taiqing meaningfully, "His Majesty wants a satisfactory result." Diwu Taiqing was startled. A satisfactory result might not necessarily be the truth of the matter. Diwu Taiqing's face sank. Most likely, he couldn't give His Majesty what he wanted. So, he only needed to follow his own way of doing things and investigate the matter. It didn't matter whether he could get the result or not. In any case, for him, it was just going through the motions. His Majesty wouldn't pay attention to him. On the contrary, he was afraid that he would do something he didn't want to see. Royal brothers fighting, disregarding human life, that was a big scandal. So, at most, he would have the opportunity to lose his salary for 3 years. Thinking clearly, Diwu Taiqing didn't worry anymore and went back to do what he needed to do. The Gong Prince stopped his 2 elder brothers and said with a fake smile, "2 imperial brothers, this younger brother admires you more and more." Prince Kong and Prince Rui naturally knew what he was talking about. After all, the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. The Gong Prince was the unlucky cicada from the beginning. Obviously, he didn't know who was behind him. In a flash, Prince Kong and Prince Rui both thought of putting the blame on each other. Teaming up with their 4th brother, taking down the enemy, then taking down their 4th brother would be much easier. They really recognized each other as their opponents, while their 4th brother was just playing a role of balance and easing the tension between them. Prince Kang's idea was particularly prominent. After all, Prince Rui was afraid of the Gong Prince's backer, Left Governor Qin Tianming, but Prince Kong knew that the Left Governor was loyal to him. This 4th brother was just a clown, not worth mentioning. Regarding this, Prince Kong was extremely proud. Who would have thought that he himself was also a clown being played around? 4th brother. Prince Kong and Prince Rui opened their mouths almost at the same time. Then they looked at each other at the same time. It must be said that they were old rivals since childhood. Sometimes, even if they didn't completely understand each other's thoughts, they still had a 70 to 80% understanding. They didn't need to say much to know each other's intentions. Very good, now that they couldn't say anything, they could only solve it in private. Let's see who has the ability to pull their 4th brother to their side. One smiled wanton and brash, the other smiled reserved and refined. The Gong Prince was so angry that his liver hurt. These 2 people completely ignored him, completely didn't put him in their eyes. They had a tacit understanding that made him hate that he couldn't directly tear them apart. Belittling him, looking down on him. Based on what, which part of him was worse than them? Just wait and see, one day, he would ruthlessly trample them under his feet, and watch them wag their tails and beg for mercy. Listen to 4th brother's words. 4th brother's ability has always been highly praised by Imperial Father. Speaking of admiration, it's 3rd brother who admires you. Your 3rd sister-in-law has been complaining recently that she didn't have time to get close to 4th sister-in-law. 3rd brother heard that the 2 of them were as close as one person before they got married. Tonight, 3rd brother will have your 3rd sister-in-law prepare some wine. You can take 4th sister-in-law to 3rd brother's house to sit. 3rd brother still has things to do here, so I'll take my leave first. Prince Rui patted the Gong Prince's shoulder, nodded to Prince Kong, turned and left, as if he wasn't worried that Prince Kong would take this opportunity to pull the Gong Prince to his side. The Gong Prince's biggest reliance was the Yu family, so he naturally paid special attention to his princess. The Gong Qin princess could be said to be the happiest among the many princesses and Junwang consorts. Her husband doted on her, and even if there were concubines in the Gong palace, they were the least compared to the other princesses, and they didn't pose a threat to her at all. She also had her father's protection. Imperial concubine Qin Shu was her aunt, and her proper mother-in-law treated her like her own daughter. She really didn't have the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Even if there were sisters-in-law who laughed at her, her life was nothing more than a mirage. She just thought they were jealous of her. The Gong Prince's face was somewhat ugly. He could refuse other invitations, but not this one. Without waiting for Prince Kong to speak, eldest brother, younger brother will also take his leave first. The other princes walked around Prince Kong, afraid of being implicated and becoming the target of his anger. Considering his current position, Prince Kong held back his anger. If it was any other time, he could have invited Old Four in the same way, and if the other side didn't agree, he could have said, "Agree to Old Third, not eldest brother. Are you looking down on me, your eldest brother?" Unfortunately, he just lost his princess, and now was not the time for a banquet. So he could only find another opportunity, and he had to be quick. If he delayed until the evening, it would be troublesome. Li Hongming, that person, even if he couldn't make Old Four join forces with him, he would still arouse Old Four's hatred towards him. After all, the Left Governor was Old Four's father-in-law. Even if he didn't care about him, the Left Governor would have scruples about his daughter. If Old Four really made things difficult for him, it would cause a lot of trouble. Thinking about it, Prince Kong still prepared to go find his imperial mother. Li Hongming could start with the Gong Qin princess, so if his imperial mother wanted to summon her, it would be equally justified. Not long after the Gong prince left, he ran into his father-in-law Qin Tianming. Greetings to Prince. Quickly dispense with the formalities. We're all family, father-in-law doesn't need to be so polite. Etiquette can't be abolished, besides, we haven't left the palace yet, naturally we can't give Prince something to talk about. Regarding Qin Tianming's attitude, the Gong prince was very pleased. Even if he relied on him, he was still a prince, a prince. As a subject, he naturally had to be respectful. This way, when he ascended the throne in the future, even if he didn't let him take power, at least he would let the Qin family enjoy wealth and glory, and his princess consort, even if she didn't hold the phoenix seal, he would let her sit on the empress seat. It must be said that the Gong prince was still too inexperienced in Qin Tianming's eyes. What kind of mentality he had, Qin Tianming was actually very clear, and he wasn't of the same mind as the champion constabulary. In addition to family reasons, the fourth prince wasn't worthy of his assistance. With Qin Tianming as a pearl, who would look at other fish eyes? Of course, those with great ambition who wanted to hold power hoped that the master was weak and the subject was strong. At the very least, they couldn't let the person on the throne have the final say. Naturally, the one they didn't want the most was Qin Tianming, a powerful, unyielding ruler. Qin Tianming was very clear, unless it was really necessary, this son-in-law of his wouldn't discuss anything with him. He secretly raised his own advisors, and right now he was probably busy going back to find them. He said something that seemed very boring, but actually had a deep meaning. As long as this son-in-law of his wasn't stupid, he should understand what he meant. The Gong prince looked at his father-in-law's back as he left, slightly narrowing his eyes. Both sides were perfunctory, both sides wanted benefits. It really was a very good idea. Prince, something happened in the imperial garden. A dressed eunuch hurriedly rushed to the Gong prince's side. Obviously, he was one of the Gong prince's people in the palace. What could happen in the imperial garden? The Gong prince said disapprovingly. The eunuch approached him and whispered a few words in his ear. The Gong prince's face became somewhat subtle. Is this true? How could this servant dare deceive Prince? The matter is very big. The other princes, imperial concubines, and the various princesses have all gone over. The Gong prince smiled meaningfully. Should I say, as expected of old Six, there really isn't anything he doesn't dare to do. Although he said that, the meaning behind his words was very sarcastic. Let's go, we'll also go take a look. I want to see if Father Emperor will still cover for him this time. They had a lot of complaints about Father Emperor's indulgence of old Six. Prince, wouldn't that be bad? After all, this matter is related to His Majesty's face. The Gong prince's attendant said. What are you afraid of? So many people have gone. The so-called law can't punish the majority. Can Father Emperor punish us all? When the Gong prince arrived, the imperial garden was really crowded, but other than the center of the incident, the rest of the people were very quiet. But although it was quiet, they all had different expressions. Some were disdainful, some were gloating, some were watching with cold eyes. Of course, there were a few people who looked particularly worried, as if they were disappointed in him, but they couldn't ignore him. Li Hongyuan faced the furious Lu Qingdi, even more indifferent than when he angered Lu Qingdi in the past, his head slightly bowed, his hand playing with a piece of warm jade. His old man's roar was even louder than the wind blowing past his ears, because he was already distracted, thinking about what happened last night. There was a group of people kneeling next to him, and the woman in the lead was wearing a palace dress, beautiful and moving, but at this time she was crying pitifully. Evil creature, are you listening to Jin? Lu Qingdi was angry, and kicked him. Who was Li Hongyuan? Even if he was distracted, it was just a subconscious reaction, and he easily dodged. You still dare to dodge? Li Hongyuan took 2 steps forward and continued to kick, but the result was the same. After repeating this several times, Lu Qingdi was tired and panting, but he couldn't even touch the corner of Li Hongyuan's clothes. Sixth brother, how can you be like this? Stop quickly. Perhaps he finally couldn't stand it anymore, Prince Kong shouted, and hurriedly stepped forward, trying to stop Li Hongyuan. With him taking the lead, many people rushed forward, but whether they wanted to stop them and persuade Lu Qingdi, or take advantage of this opportunity to retaliate against Li Hongyuan, only they themselves knew. Li Hongyuan sneered, no matter how many people came forward, and no matter what they wanted to do, he didn't fight back, he just, narrowly, avoided them, intentionally or unintentionally leading them, including Lu Qingdi, who was inadvertently hit. For a time, the scene was abnormally chaotic, but all of them were of noble status, the guards didn't dare to step forward, if any of them were hurt, they would lose their heads. The most unlucky ones were the group of people kneeling next to them, because most of them were women, they screamed and hurriedly dodged, messing up their hair, messing up their clothes, and looking very embarrassed. In the end, it was the Empress who came out to calm the scene. What are you waiting for? Pull your masters away, are you all dead? Their personal attendants braved the danger of being beaten, hurriedly hugged their masters, and used all their strength to pull them away. The Empress took this opportunity to walk to Lu Qingdi, and whispered, Your Majesty, calm down first. Even if old Sixth did something wrong, you are his father, you can just teach him a lesson. Why do you have to do it yourself? It will be a joke. Imperial concubine Su trembled with anger. What did she mean by just teach him a lesson? It was natural for the father to teach his son a lesson, not to mention the father was the emperor. But the Empress clearly meant to let the guards do it. The emperor was angry and ordered the guards to do it. Naturally, they didn't dare to be merciful, and the consequences were unimaginable. She stepped forward and knelt straight in front of Lu Qingdi. Your Majesty, Yuan-er's daily behavior may occasionally be a little out of line, but he won't do such a disgraceful thing. There may be some misunderstanding, Your Majesty. Then she turned back and stared at Li Hongyuan. Why don't you kneel down and explain to your father? Li Hongyuan saw the obvious worry in her eyes, changed his previous indifference, frowned, and walked forward. Mother, get up first. Yuan-er, get up first. Li Hongyuan insisted. Imperial concubine Su was helpless. She glanced at Lu Qingdi and saw that he didn't say anything, so she had to get up. Li Hongyuan knelt down unhurriedly. Father, if you're still angry, you can kick me now. Even if you kick me to death, I won't move. This wasn't an admission of fault, nor an explanation. It was clearly adding fuel to the fire. Lu Qingdi subconsciously raised his foot, but he thought of something and restrained himself. But his face was uglier than before, and his back teeth were grinding. You evil creature, you still don't want to admit your fault, do you? Father, didn't I just take liberties with a woman? Do you need to be so angry? I thought you were used to it. Didn't you just take liberties with a woman? She's my woman, your concubine mother. Lu Qingdi roared. It was unknown whether Lu Qingdi was really mad or he was too lazy to cover up what Li Hongyuan had done. Anyway, those who should know already knew. He had no intention of evacuating the crowd. Instead, he pointed out the core of the matter with one sentence. Since he didn't care, Li Hongyuan didn't care either. She really has the self-awareness of a concubine mother. When she saw me, she should have avoided me automatically instead of coming up to me and saluting me shyly. She obviously wants to cheat on me. If I don't help her, won't I fail to live up to the beauty's grace? Besides, this son only moved his lips and didn't even touch a single finger of hers. In just a few words, she turned around and acted as if this son would do anything to her in public. Luqingdi's face turned black. Was it his son who took the initiative to take liberties with his concubine, or was it his concubine who seduced his son first? These were two completely different natures. The latter was more infuriating than the former. Even if he had been taking good care of himself, he was an old man after all. Whether it was his appearance or his physical strength, he was old. His son was young and strong, and he had a good appearance that few women could refuse. Even if he was the emperor and could have anything he wanted, sometimes he couldn't help but be jealous. His woman was eyeing his son because he couldn't take it anymore. Extraordinary shame and humiliation. Luqingdi was like a ferocious beast on the verge of death. He turned his head and stared at the disheveled concubine. It was as if she had just been caught in the act of adultery. Luqingdi's eyes revealed an ominous glint, as if he would pounce on her and bite her to death in the next moment. That woman trembled in fear. Emperor, Emperor, it's not like this, it's not like this. You must believe this concubine, it's Jin Qin Wang. The beauties in Fu Huang's palace are like clouds, the beauties in Urchin's other courtyard are also not few. Taking away their status, in terms of appearance, Urchins seem to be better. To a Ken, they are just playthings. Who would care about their status, Li Hongyuan indifferently said, and then faintly glanced at that palace concubine. Just this appearance, just this figure, just this vulgar self-restraint, it's not enough for a Ken to take the initiative to take a fancy to her. A Ken is very suspicious, whether or not someone is deliberately framing a Ken. Asking Fu Huang to investigate clearly and make a decision for a Ken. Just look at what he was saying. He still didn't take a fancy to her. Then as her father, he had pampered this woman for several months and promoted her again and again. Wasn't he blind and tasteless? Luqingdi's chest rapidly moved up and down, but it was probably because he was angered by Li Hongyuan every few days. Although he was angry, he appeared to be in high spirits and didn't show any problems. Concubine Li will be demoted to the last rank, banished to the cold palace, never to return. Take her away. Emperor, Emperor, don't, Emperor. It's not like this, you can't do this to, woo. Concubine Li, who was struggling to pounce forward, was caught by the chamberlains. Then her mouth was gagged, so as not to startle His Majesty and be dragged away. And those palace servants who were originally serving her, like quails, shrunk into a ball, afraid that His Majesty would take his anger out on them. They didn't have such a good life to enter the cold palace. The biggest possibility was that they would be directly beaten to death. They wished they could find a hole to burrow into. No one was surprised by Concubine Li's ending. Even if the responsibility wasn't on her, with things like this, she couldn't continue to be pampered endlessly. And in these few months, Concubine Li relied on His Majesty's favor to make the other palace concubines look bad. Even when facing the Empress, noble consort Su, and the other most powerful women in the imperial harem, she dared to be perfunctory. The Empress and the others knew that she wouldn't have a good ending, so they didn't pay attention to her. The others were so angry that they stomped their feet. Now that they were suddenly trampled into the mud, they clapped their hands and cheered, but at the same time, they felt inexplicably sad. They all knew what kind of person Luqingdi was. It was said that emperors were heartless, and he was very good at this. Only a few people knew that he once had feelings, but with that woman's death, his feelings were buried. Everyone was more concerned about how Luqingdi would deal with Li Hongyuan. He was too hateful. Even if they didn't have any conflicts with him, they hated his arrogance and domineering attitude. Naturally, they didn't want him to be well. Your Majesty, Even if concubine Li was in the wrong first, Jin Qinhuang just went with the flow and took liberties with concubine Li. This is disgraceful and heresy. Normally, there is no reason for a son to take liberties with his father's concubine. That is a breach of virtue, a breach of contract, and should be severely punished by law. One of the palace concubines walked past the empress and the 4 concubines to take the initiative to speak. What she said was reasonable, but the hatred in her eyes when she looked at Li Hongyuan was too obvious. Su Guifei tilted her head and glanced at her. She knew why this woman hated Yuan. When Yuan was 7 or 8 years old, he knocked away the male fetus in her belly, causing her body to be damaged and unable to conceive again. She was able to live peacefully until now. Other than the emperor compensating her by promoting her to a concubine position, she herself wasn't a threat. She didn't expect that the person who had been silent all this time would bear a grudge until now and still want to take the opportunity to take revenge. Li Hongyuan also raised his head and glanced at that palace concubine, but he didn't have any impression. He had offended and dealt with so many people, where would he have the mind to remember each and every one of them in his heart? Retracting his gaze, he said, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally, "For a beauty, it's better to be older." The palace concubine who spoke paled and tightened her handkerchief. No matter how much hatred she had in her heart, she didn't dare to speak again. Li Hongyuan wasn't a stingy person. With concubine Li in front of him, what he said now was a full threat. He was a person who wasn't afraid of anything and could do anything, but others couldn't, especially these concubines. If their reputations were tarnished, they would be left in the cold at best, or die suddenly. Moreover, he wasn't a fool. He didn't need to do it himself. It would be too easy for him to find a guard or even a chamberlain to destroy them. Based on the emperor's infinite indulgence towards him, no matter how severe the punishment was, it wouldn't take his life. As for the people involved, those that could be killed would be killed. Those that couldn't be killed would be strictly ordered by the emperor to keep their mouths shut. Like this, who would dare to fight to the death with this living king of hell? It was said that there were only wrong names, but there were no wrong nicknames. Living king of hell, he really was a living king of hell. Yuan, you're still talking nonsense. Shut up. Imperial concubine Su sternly shouted, but her eyes were filled with worry. Li Hongyuan, who had been unconcerned from beginning to end, softened his gaze because of her words. The sharpness around him also lessened a lot. At least he didn't feel as arrogant and unrepentant as before. He also obediently shut his mouth and didn't speak again. Imperial concubine Su seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Your Majesty, Yuan grew up by this concubine's side. Like Ming and Min Xiang, he is this concubine's flesh and blood. Regardless of whether they are good or bad, this is a fact that cannot be changed. If they are outstanding, this concubine will naturally be happy. But if they do something wrong, this concubine will also bear half of the responsibility. This concubine will naturally bear half of their punishment. Please be lenient. Lu Qingdi's expression softened. You are, what can I say about you? It's because you blindly indulged him that he became more and more lawless. When he was young, you could be harsh on him, but after he grew up, I haven't seen you say a single harsh word to him. That's different. When I was young, I was more strict and could correct the bad things in their bodies. Now, this concubine can't just watch them suffer. Isn't that cutting this concubine's heart? It's probably because this concubine doesn't know how to teach children. None of the 3 of them are easy to worry about. Imperial concubine Su said helplessly. My dear concubine, you're wrong. We've seen how you've raised your child. You can't be blamed for his current state. He's naturally irritable and bad-tempered. It's not like we don't know that you've spent more effort on him than third brother and Minxiang. As for Min Xiang, she occasionally has a small temper. This concubine also likes her. Ordinary families pay attention to pampering their daughters, not to mention our imperial family's princess. Not to mention Ming, her. This concubine is very satisfied with him. Ming, her was mediocre before this mission. Now that your majesty is satisfied, it's because your majesty has taught him well. Hearing this, Lu Qingdi was overjoyed. He laughed loudly and didn't look angry at all. Their harmonious appearance made many people secretly grit their teeth. Especially when Lu Qingdi said, "This concubine is very satisfied with him." Was it just a casual remark or did it have other intentions? Your Majesty, then Yuan her, with Li Hongyuan's threat, even the Empress was quite afraid. She wasn't afraid that he would do something to her. No matter how presumptuous Li Hongyuan was, he wouldn't be so stupid. She was afraid that he would use other methods to vent his anger on her son and ruin the marriage between her son and her niece. The Empress didn't dare to underestimate his destructive power. Therefore, she didn't dare to say anything at this time. In your opinion, my beloved concubine, how should we deal with this bastard? Your Majesty, after a few days. Why not let Yuan or stay at White Dragon Temple for a few days, abstain from eating mushroom vegetarian food, and let the monks watch over him? It can be considered a small punishment. What does your Majesty think? Lu Qingdi's face changed slightly and returned to normal in a flash, as my beloved concubine says. A group of people who were waiting for Li Hongyuan to be unlucky all had black faces. This kind of big mistake was over just like that. Abstaining from eating mushroom vegetarian food for a period of time could also be considered a punishment. What was the difference between this and reflecting on one's mistakes behind closed doors? However, since Lu Qingdi agreed, there was no room for others to interfere. Even if this matter was known to everyone, it couldn't be brought to court. Daring to mention something that made Lu Qingdi lose face, you think you're as bold as Jin Qinhuang. Think you're as forgiving as Jin Qinhuang. Dream on. Li Hongyuan was greedy for beauty and enjoyment. Coming to a Buddhist place, there were all kinds of rules and precepts. This could be considered a severe punishment for him. Those who were unbalanced could only comfort themselves like this. Bastard, immediately roll to White Dragon Temple. Don't return without an imperial decree. Aken obeys the decree. Not waiting for Lu Qingdi to call him up, he slowly stood up. That appearance made Lu Qingdi want to slap him again, but no matter what, he was indifferent. To put it bluntly, he was a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. In the end, the one who was angry was only himself. What are you still standing here for? Do you all have nothing to do? Get lost for Zhen. Such obvious anger. All the people who were watching the play immediately acted as if they had something important to do. One by one, they asked to leave and even voluntarily sealed their mouths. You bastard, you still haven't gotten lost. The one that Jin doesn't want to see the most right now is you. Aken has something to say to Mu Fei. Fu Wang still has political affairs that haven't been finished, right? The implication was, still not leaving. In the end, Lu Qingdi couldn't take it anymore. He ruthlessly gave Li Hongyuan a kick before leaving in a huff. Li Hongyuan looked at the footprint on the corner of his clothes and frowned. It wasn't because of pain, but purely because he found it dirty. Noble consort Su naturally squatted down and used her handkerchief to wipe away the footprint. It was like she had fallen down when she was young and was helped up. Then, she would personally wipe away the dust on her clothes and comfort her with gentle words. Li Hongyuan's expression was slightly strange. He took a step back. Mu Fei, noble consort Su stood up straight and looked at him kindly. What's wrong? This kind of thing is done by the palace servants. How could I trouble you to do it personally? Mu Fei is used to it. If you don't like it, Mufei will pay more attention in the future. It's not that I don't like it. I can just. Li Hongyuan paused, as if he didn't know how to continue. You just love Mufei. Mufei knows. Don't make your Fu Huang angry. Naturally, he won't do anything to you. Then, these things wouldn't have happened. What happened today? Mufei believes that you won't be so willful and rash. Even if concubine Li's behavior was improper first, you wouldn't go near her for no reason. There were so many people just now, but you didn't want to say it. Now, can you tell Mufei? Noble consort Su said warmly. Li Hongyuan's face was cold, and he didn't want to speak. Noble consort, Master saw concubine Li being disrespectful to you a few days ago, so, shut up. Li Hongyuan coldly interrupted eunuch Mu. Noble consort Su was stunned. Tears quickly welled up in her eyes, and she felt very touched. You're really, Mufei. Li Hongyuan frowned, and his face became colder. However, anyone could see that he didn't know how to comfort noble consort Su. Because he was at a loss, he appeared even colder. Noble consort Su wiped away the tears that didn't fall and smiled happily. Others say that my son is bad. How could they know that my son is the most filial and considerate? But don't do such things that will damage your reputation in the future. Mufei has been in this harem for more than 20 years. Concubine Li is just a little girl who is spoiled and arrogant. Mufei has seen too much of it. Mufei doesn't take her seriously. Mufei knows what your Fu Huang is thinking. He's just greedy for a moment of novelty. It won't last long. Mufei, don't listen to Mu Han's nonsense. I'm just doing it on a whim. Noble consort Su saw that he didn't admit it, so she didn't say anything else. But her expression clearly said, Mufei knows that is shy. When you go to White Dragon Temple this time, you can stay there peacefully for a while. Although it's a vegetarian fast, the vegetarian dishes in White Dragon Temple are famous for being delicious. Before Mufei entered the palace, she often went out to eat vegetarian dishes. In addition, copy Buddhist scriptures when you have nothing to do. Just treat it as praying for your Fu Huang. Don't cause any trouble. That's a sacred place of Buddhism. If you touch something that you shouldn't touch, I'm afraid your Fu Huang will really be angry. Listen to Mufei this time and be patient for a while, okay? Li Hongyuan paused. Mufei, don't worry. Mufei, I understand. That's good. Noble consort Su knew that as long as it was something he promised her, there was nothing he couldn't do. In that case, I'll take my leave first. I don't know how long it will take for me to come back. Mufei, take care. Don't worry. Your Fu Huang won't let you stay in White Dragon Temple for too long, noble consort Su said meaningfully. He thought that she would find an opportunity to plead with Luqingdi. Li Hongyuan nodded indifferently. He didn't care about it at all. I'll take my leave. Once Li Hongyuan was far away, the mama by noble consort Su's side said, this mother and son are truly mother and son. No one can compare to them. No matter how Prince behaves outside, in front of noble consort Su, he is still the same as when he was young. Yes, is actually very smart. He gave up a lot because of me and Ming, noble consort Su whispered. Li Hongming, Prince Rui, stood behind a tree not far away, watching and listening silently. Then he left expressionlessly. Only he knew what he was thinking. As they walked further and further away, the cold aura around Li Hongyuan became stronger and stronger. Eunuch Mu followed behind him, not daring to breathe loudly. Last night, he said that he would go to White Dragon Temple to rest for a while, and today he achieved his goal. It seemed that he had a plan. It was so easy to achieve what he wanted, and it was killing two birds with one stone. He should be happy. But looking at him, his mood was worse than before he went to the Luo family. After thinking about it, Eunuch Mu realized that the problem might be caused by noble consort Su. They all knew that his master was ambitious for the throne and was determined to get it. So, he secretly set up a big trap. Maybe it was because he felt ashamed to face noble consort Su, who raised him up. Or was it that master and noble consort Su were not as close as they seemed on the surface? As for what was going on, master didn't mention it, nor did he express it clearly. No matter how hard Eunuch Mu thought about it, it was useless. However, he didn't need to waste his time to speculate on this matter. Leaving the palace, before Li Hongyuan got on the carriage, he looked at the majestic palace and thought of noble consort Su's last instructions. The punishment was fake, the praying for blessings was real. As for the object of the praying, naturally, it couldn't be touched by something that shouldn't be touched. That was the taboo in his good imperial father's heart. No matter how much he indulged him, if he stepped on his bottom line, he would incur his thunderous wrath. However, even if he had completely broken all the precepts of the Buddhist sect, you still need to know about it. Returning to Jin Qin Wang Fu, because they were already prepared, they quickly packed up their things and didn't make a big fuss. After all, a dignified Qin Wang being punished was not a glorious thing. When Gong Mama received the things from the shadow guards, she trembled with anger. It wasn't easy for her to calm down. Turning around, she had no choice but to find her Mississippi's miss, the peach blossoms in White Dragon Temple have bloomed. Do you want to go take a look? The peach forest in White Dragon Temple is very large. Every time it blooms, it is especially beautiful. In the entire capital, you can't find a better peach forest. Chapter 69. Is that so? Then I'll definitely feast my eyes on it. Jingwan was obviously very interested. She thought for a moment and said, I'll invite Sister Jia, Cousin Yuan and Ingshuang. The more the merrier. I'll send them the invitation right away. Jingwan wasn't a person who would drag her feet and act on her words. Granny Gong hoped that she would refuse. If she did, then the King of Hell wouldn't blame them for not doing a good job. Unfortunately, this excuse just happened to poke at the young lady's weak spot. She once again helped the tyrant do evil. She sighed in her heart, young lady, you're so excited, but you're taking the initiative to walk into the wolf's den, into the tiger's mouth. Jingwan said as she wrote the invitation, when you go and report to grandmother, you might as well ask her if she wants to go together. Grandmother has been away from the capital for so many years. She must miss a lot of places in the capital. You're so filial. With Madame Luo around, it was perfectly justifiable for her to keep the girl by her side. Naturally, she wouldn't easily be left alone. If the King of Hell wanted to make a move, he would have to think twice. Although Mama Gong didn't think that he could be stopped as long as there were more people, she could only comfort herself with this. This has nothing to do with filial piety. I'm just putting myself in grandmother's shoes and thinking about it. I think she would probably be like that. Jingwan finished writing the invitation and brought it directly to the main courtyard. She suggested going to White Dragon Temple to play and burn incense. Madame Luo naturally didn't disagree. She didn't have anything to do for the time being and didn't care much about the peach forest in White Dragon Temple. What she missed more was the vegetarian food in White Dragon Temple. It's been so many years. I'm afraid the cooks have changed long ago. I wonder if the taste is still the same. As the saying goes, take the essence and discard the dregs. Maybe the taste will be better. Jingwan said with a smile. Wan is right. Who knows, it might be even better. When are you and your close friends going to meet? Tomorrow. When it comes to flowers and plants, you're always so impatient. Madame Luo pointed at her in the air. Granddaughter only has that little hobby. Jingwan did not feel that there was anything wrong with this at all. If grandmother feels that it is not appropriate, we can delay it. Anyway, the invitation has not been sent out yet. Although she was eager to see the beautiful scenery, it was not impossible to wait for 1 or 2 more days. No need, just tomorrow. Madame Luo directly asked the person beside her to send the invitation. Then, Jingwan thought of another question. Grandmother, do you want to ask the other sisters if they want to go together? She didn't think of them in the beginning, was it not good? Jingwan began to reflect on herself. After all, she was no longer in Qi and prefecture. She was not the only girl who needed to go out from time to time. Moreover, there was no freedom in the capital. There's no need. They've been in the capital for a long time. They've seen what they should see and played what they should play. Maybe they've already been there when the peach blossoms first bloomed. I'll get someone to ask your fourth aunt later. Okay, I'll listen to grandmother. If she could not go with Luo Jingying, Jingwan was naturally more than happy. The invitation that Jingwan sent out quickly received replies. They were all sent back by the person in charge of sending the invitation. They all said that they wanted to go. The fastest belonged to Sun Yijia, who was of the highest status. According to common sense, the invitation sent to Dinghua Manor would only be received the next day. However, Sun Yijia returned home yesterday and told the gatekeeper that if there were people from the Luo Shangshu Manor looking for her or sending her an invitation, he should directly lead them to her place. Therefore, Sun Yijia directly met the servants of the Luo family. After receiving Jingwan's invitation, she was naturally very happy. Not to mention going to White Dragon Temple to admire the flowers, even if it was to look at the weeds in the suburbs, she would be happy. She immediately replied and said that she would go to the Luo Manor as soon as possible tomorrow. The other 2 families were not so complicated or troublesome. In addition, it was the people of the Luo family. The gatekeepers of the 2 families did not dare to neglect and smoothly met the person. Jingwan had just finalized the trip here. On the other side, Li Hongyuan had almost arrived at White Dragon Temple. What Li Hongyuan did in the flower market could be said to be ruthless, involving more than half of the officials in the capital. On the surface, none of the most powerful princes were able to escape unscathed. Not only that, but it also caused another fierce fight among them, causing them to suspect each other. And as the main culprit, after stirring up the water, not only did he clap his hands and walk away, no one even suspected him. Those who vaguely guessed that it might be his doing did not say a word no matter how emotional they were in their hearts. They just repeatedly warned themselves that if they followed such a master, even if their room to display their abilities was reduced a lot, and they might even become a person who only needed to do things and not talk, they should not have any disloyalty. Hidden in the woods at the side, Li Hongyuan looked at the magnificent temple that was filled with Buddhist incense. His thoughts drifted. White Dragon Temple was a temple of the imperial family. Except for a few special days, it was also open to the common people. Thus, it was full of incense all year round. In addition, its abbot, Master Liaochen, was one of the most eminent monks in the world. Master Liaochen's fortune-telling was very accurate. However, he could only tell at most 3 trigrams a year, and it had to be a fated person. Otherwise, not even the emperor could make him make an exception. For some people, the so-called fated person was someone that the other party found pleasing to the eye. But Master Liaochen wasn't like that. He didn't care about high or low status. He didn't even need to rely on his eyes to determine whether someone was fated or not. Every year, countless people hoped to become the fated person that Master Liaochen spoke of. Not only did they want to know their own fate, but they also hoped that Master Liaochen could change it. That's right. Rumor had it that Master Liaochun's greatest ability was to defy the heavens and change people's fates. No one knew where this rumor came from, but the world firmly believed it. It wasn't that there weren't any influential people who wanted to force Master Liaochun to change his fate. However, that person died an unnatural death not long after. That person had been criticized by several masters at the same time. Although the road to life was bumpy, it was a sign of longevity. But he hadn't even reached 30 when he died. For a time, those who were itching to make a move kept quiet out of fear. They all treated Master Liaochun with respect. It was good to have him tell their fortunes or give them a few pointers, but they couldn't and wouldn't force it. However, Master Liaochun had a few rules. It wasn't about the fate of the nation, the near future, or the distant future. The affairs of the nation were easy to understand. The near future referred to things that would happen in a very short time. The world was ever-changing. Things that were close at hand were difficult to change even if one could predict them. The distant future referred to things that wouldn't happen in 100 years. The distant future was too distant to be divined. It couldn't be divined. Master Liaochun wasn't an elusive person. Although he left the capital from time to time, he wouldn't be completely untraceable. Even if an important person or someone special wanted to see him and listen to the teachings of Buddhism, he wouldn't avoid them because of his status. Li Hongyuan and Master Liaochun could be considered old acquaintances. Not only in this life, but in his previous life as well. During his years on the throne, if Master Liaochun hadn't comforted him from time to time, he would have been even more vicious and killed even more people. His reputation as a tyrant would have spread far beyond the imperial court. In this life, when he left the palace at the age of 16, the first thing he did was find Master Liaochun. He didn't say much, only one thing: can this prince get what he wants? No one knew if Master Liaochun had seen through him. He only said, "Your Highness's obsession is like a demon. Will your Highness give up even if I say no?" "No." The mischievous Li Hongyuan's answer was straightforward. "In that case, what's the point of caring about whether I can or can't? You'll know when the time comes." From then on, Li Hongyuan stopped asking and didn't ask Master Liaochun to tell his fortune. Occasionally, he would come to the master to play chess, drink tea, or discuss the teachings of Buddhism. In fact, Li Hongyuan was well versed in the teachings of Buddhism, but he had always been dismissive of it. He'd even criticized it as worthless in front of Master Liaochun. Master Liaochun would only smile and say nothing. When Li Hongyuan finished, he'd laugh and say, "Your Highness understands the teachings of Buddhism, so you can find other ways to refute it." In return, Li Hongyuan snorted coldly. Li Hongyuan only had eunuch Mu with him. After standing there for about 15 minutes, they went directly to the rear courtyard of White Dragon Temple without attracting any attention. Master Liaochun was already waiting there with a group of people. He was dressed in a monk's robe and had a benevolent countenance. He had a long white beard and looked quite old. However, his complexion was ruddy and his eyes were not as cloudy as an ordinary old man's. Instead, they were as clear as a baby's. It was incredible. However, just by looking at you with those eyes, it seemed to be able to make you calm down quickly. Master Liaochun put his palms together. "This poor monk greets your Highness." The monks behind him followed suit. "Master, there's no need to be so courteous." Li Hongyuan returned the greeting. Compared to when he had left the Li Palace, he was now like a completely different person, a world of difference. The group went directly to Li Hongyuan's small courtyard. They pushed open one of the side rooms. It was clean and simple, filled with a fragrant aroma. Naturally, the incense burning there was the best quality of sandalwood. Li Hongyuan and Master Liaochun sat on opposite sides of a short table. The novice monk quickly served them tea. This was a tea unique to White Dragon Temple. It was grown from a several hundred-year-old tea tree, and only a small amount was produced each year. More importantly, Master Liaochen was in charge of everything from the picking of the tea to the final product. Perhaps because of this, he was tainted with a hint of Buddhist nature. In his previous life, after Li Hongyuan became emperor, he domineeringly took all the tea for himself. Fortunately, Master Liaochen was magnanimous and didn't argue with him. If he wanted it, he would give it to him. Li Hongyuan looked at the faint smoke rising from the cup. The tea had a unique taste. It was bitter, then sweet. After swallowing the tea, his mouth would be filled with a sweet fragrance. It was truly memorable. More importantly, it had the effect of calming the mind. "Your Highness seems to be in a good mood," said Master Liaochen. "Master, you have sharp eyes." "Of course I can't hide anything from you," replied Li Hongyuan unconcernedly. "Your Highness will get what you want," said Master Liaochen. His words didn't seem stiff at all. Li Hongyuan paused, then raised his head. "After 6 years, why are you suddenly bringing this up again? Compared to before, Grand Master's attitude is poles apart. Your Highness will get what you want. It is the fortune of the world." "Master, you're too serious. Your Highness should know that this humble monk's words are not empty." Li Hongyuan had been haunted by his obsession. Now that he had gotten what he wanted, his obsession was gone. His heart was at ease, and everything was at peace. If his obsession didn't disappear, the more time passed, the deeper his inner demons would grow. Moreover, he held great power in his hands. Who knew what kind of storms he would stir up? The ones who would suffer would naturally be the innocent. Perhaps he would lose his reason one day, or perhaps he would let himself do whatever he wanted. It was hard to say whether he wouldn't cause misery and suffering. Although he didn't want a crumbling empire, that was because he wanted to have time to enjoy himself with Jingwan. If Jingwan couldn't get what he wanted, he would naturally have plenty of time. Perhaps the more chaotic the world was, the happier he would be. That way, he would have something to pass the time. Compared to his previous life, this was undoubtedly even worse. "Then dare I ask, Master, was this prince able to get what he wanted all along, or were you prepared to change this prince's fate? 6 years ago, it was still like looking at flowers in the fog. There were many uncertainties, but your Highness' actions opened up a path. So, as expected, everything depends on effort. She will come to White Dragon Temple in a few days. Master, you should take a look. Your Highness wants this monk to read the girl's fate. Everything will be done according to Master's rules. This prince won't insist. It's rare for the words won't insist to come from your Highness's mouth. When it comes to her, this prince won't insist. Master, you should know the reason." Master Liaochen nodded. "Your Highness's original intentions have never changed. You don't care about other things, good or bad." There was a light knock on the door. "Master, the old benefactor at the foot of the mountain requests an audience." It was the crisp voice of a child. "Amitba, Master understands. Go and ask the old benefactor to wait for a moment." Then, he looked at Li Hongyuan with clear and kind eyes. "Your Highness, please do as you wish. This poor monk will be back soon." Li Hongyuan glanced at him. "You're still the same as before, pretending to be benevolent. You can abandon this prince for a commoner. If you want to leave, then leave. You don't have to come again today. This prince can enjoy some peace and quiet." It sounded like he was angry at Master Liaochen's neglect. After all, his words were no longer respectful. But in reality, Master Liaochen was special to him, so he was relatively lenient. "Amitba, it's all because your Highness is benevolent. If your Highness didn't allow it, this monk wouldn't have acted so boldly. Old monk, you've learned how to be glib. Monks don't lie." Li Hongyuan sneered. Don't use the word benevolent on this prince. This prince's heart and lungs are all black. Don't taint it. Master Liaochen was still compassionate. He smiled warmly. This monk is never wrong. Li Hongyuan couldn't be bothered to pay him any more attention. After Master Liaochen left, Li Hongyuan stood up and walked to the window. Eunuch Mu pushed it open first. Because White Dragon Temple was an imperial temple, there were naturally places where ordinary people couldn't enter. This small courtyard was more unique. It was secluded, quiet, and not too far away. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't attract much attention. Li Hongyuan liked this room because he could see the entire peach forest behind the mountain when he opened the window. The view was unusually wide, and the peach blossoms were truly beautiful. Master, Miss Luo, and the others will come to White Dragon Temple tomorrow. Eunuch Mu did his job as a lackey. The competition among eunuchs was fierce. There were only so many masters, and few of them were doing well. There were countless people with cheap lives. No matter who stood out a little, there would always be a large group of eunuchs keeping an eye on you. They weren't there to prevent you from making mistakes, but to expect you to make mistakes. Just like in other places, there were endless schemes and tricks. One careless mistake and you could be pulled down. Last night, because he didn't guess the real purpose of his master's visit to White Dragon Temple in time, he was almost demoted. Therefore, Eunuch Mu was doubly alert. He had to let his master know that he was irreplaceable. Even if his master had a bad temper, and following him was like hanging one's head on one's waist sometimes, it was better than being trampled into the mud by others. Moreover, there were two sides to everything. When his master was in a bad mood, he should think more about his good. Li Hongyuan wasn't surprised. Based on Wan's infatuation, it was already too late for her to wait until tomorrow. Who's coming? Eunuch Mu named the people invited by Jingwan one by one, and then the people of the Luo family who would accompany them. Li Hongyuan's expression was indifferent. No matter how many people came, they could not stop his plan from being carried out. He had been hiding in the dark all this time. Naturally, he was not satisfied. Even if he could not have intimate behavior openly, at least he had to let Wan know him first. When they met as strangers in the bridal chamber, he would waste 1 or 2 years of beautiful time. How stupid would he be to do that? Go and get a jar of 6-year-old peach blossom wine. Yes. Therefore, the rules and precepts of Buddhism were really nothing for Li Hongyuan. Whether he broke or kept the precepts, it was all up to him. Everyone thought that Li Hongyuan enjoyed life and couldn't bear the slightest hardship. However, after he ascended the throne in his previous life, he lost too much because of the fight for the throne. At first, he didn't have any available talents, so he went to war himself. For a period of time, because of the defeat on the battlefield, as the emperor, he lived in the open. Li Hongyuan didn't make a sound. The hardship in the temple was nothing to him. Of course, Li Hongyuan wouldn't go too far. It didn't matter if he drank a little wine and ate a little meat. He wouldn't break the precepts of lust, unless Wan took the initiative to make him break it. However, according to his understanding of Wan, even if they were in love and even got married, she wouldn't agree to mess around here. Just thinking about that scene made him particularly want to have a try. Maybe because of the taboo, Wan would have an unexpected reaction. Li Hongyuan's eyes became somewhat gloomy. He even licked his lips. That appearance was particularly tempting and frightening. Mu Gonggong dug out a jar of wine from under the tree under the eyes of the monks in the courtyard. The 4 monks were all like wooden pillars, not even lifting their eyelids. When Li Hongyuan was 16 years old, he went to Bailong Temple to get countless peach blossoms to brew wine and directly buried it in the courtyard. He said that this would make the wine more mellow and delicious. After that, once a year, more than half of the courtyard's underground space was filled with wine. However, no one said anything because it was permitted by the abbot. According to Master Liaochen, Jin Qinhuang's status was noble. There was no need to care about such a small matter. It seemed to show that he was also a layman who would bow his head to the powerful. But when he said this, if his expression wasn't as compassionate as usual, perhaps it would have been a bit believable. Those who knew about it all believed that if it was anyone else, even if it was the emperor, Master Liaochen would have refused. Unfortunately, except for Li Hongyuan, this living king of hell who deviated from the orthodoxy, there was probably no one who would do such a thing. So some people hoped that he couldn't bear the hardship of breaking the precepts and would be beaten by the upright and plain-spoken monks. Naturally, they were disappointed. Just as he said, if they wanted to find fault with him, they first had to know what he had done. More than one person secretly used tricks to make the eunuchs who went to Bailong Temple to deliver the oral message to hurry up and arrange everything before Li Hongyuan arrived. As a result, there were a lot of monks inside and outside the courtyard, but they were all decorations for some people in the imperial palace to see or to play the role of guards. Eunuch Mu patted the clay to clean the edges of the wine jar and the outside. He took out the wine cup from the secret compartment in the wing room and washed it, ready to pour wine for Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan waved his hand, reached out to pick up the wine jar, and directly raised his head to drink. Part of the wine slid down the sides, down the neck, into the collar, and disappeared. Gradually, the color of the clothes darkened. It was obvious that the clothes were soaked and stuck to the skin. Even if he wore more than one layer, the lines of his chest and the rolling of his throat could be seen clearly, Eunuch Mu secretly regretted. Fortunately, there were no women here. After finishing the wine jar, Li Hongyuan casually threw it through the window into the courtyard with a bang. Li Hongyuan was still sitting steadily. There was no redness on his face, as if he wasn't drunk at all. He even said, "Move-in, have the kitchen cook 2 vegetarian dishes and quickly send them back to the imperial palace for noble consort Su. As long as I'm in Bailong Temple, I can't rest." Noble consort Su said that she missed the vegetarian dishes in Bailong Temple, so his master sent them back to her. Such filial piety. But his master called her noble consort Su, not mother. Stop. Yes. Li Hongyuan walked to the side of the hard Kong bed and sat down. He slowly closed his eyes and his body went limp. He propped himself up with one hand and laid down flat. His breathing soon became light and long, as if he had already fallen asleep. Eunuch Mu was lucky to taste the peach blossom wine once. It didn't taste strong and even had the fragrance of peach blossoms, which was more in line with women's preferences. But it was very strong. He drank the whole jar directly without any buffer. Eunuch Mu stepped forward and looked at his wet clothes. He hesitated for a moment and covered him with the thin quilt, but he didn't dare to change his clothes. There was once a similar situation. Before his hand reached out to his master's collar, he was kicked away. That kick almost killed him. Thinking about it now, he still felt the pain. Since then, he didn't dare to act rashly. Fortunately, his master didn't punish him for his poor service after he woke up. "Wan," he murmured. It seemed that he was really drunk. Hearing this, Eunuch Mu quietly retreated and gently cleaned up the spilled wine and the broken wine jars outside. It was really a sin to let those monks clean up and smell the wine. Master had harmed enough people. It was better to let go of these monks who had lived in peace. Master Liaochen finished his work and returned. He stood by the window in the corridor and looked at the sleeping Li Hongyuan. He put his palms together and said, "Amitba. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.